So, does it say we're streaming? Okay. I guess... Wait. Actually, I didn't see... Oh, okay. Now we are live. Hello, everybody. It's Prince of Queens, and welcome to the first Gaytriarchy in almost 2 months or so. I realize that it's been a while, so I apologize about that. But it's been really hard for me to get the hang of OBS. And, I still don't entirely have the hang of it, and it also seems to have a lot of bugging issues. So I'm still using the display capture thingy because I can't figure out how exactly to get it set up so that I got the window display thing to work, but I haven't gotten it set up in such a way where the you can actually see everything that's on it. You can only see bits and pieces for some reason, which that confuses the crap out of me. But regardless, I am here joined today by this wonderful fellow I met at the ICMI and saw his presentation, and his name is Kursat Pekgoz. I believe that's maybe how you say it.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. And
just call me Chris, which is my middle name.
Okay.
Short for my middle.
Yeah, I'll just try to call you Chris. I got used to thinking of you as Kursat, so, but he doesn't specialize in this. He's actually studied a great deal of academic disciplines, but in terms of the type of thing that most people would mostly be interested in here, he is a men's rights activist. Like, he actually does activism to further the equal rights, or the potentially, hopefully, someday equal rights of men. And I guess some minors, because some minors go to university before, and he works specifically with Title IX to try to change discrimination on university campus, which, if you're watching this, you probably know it's absolutely rampant to an absurd degree. And so, yeah, he's here to answer audience questions hopefully at some point, though it's going to be hard for me to actually read them because I'm having to do the display capture thing, and so I'm hoping that Spaceman gets here as soon as possible, because then he can do that. And but otherwise, maybe Kursat, you could have an eye on the window if you want to. But what's up?
I don't see the live cast right now. So if you send me a link, I will be happy to see.
Yeah, it probably hasn't shown up yet on my my feed, but I don't know. Maybe try refreshing the browser once or twice. Hold on, I just got a message, so I have to look in my on my phone, because I think it's probably from Spacepan. Let's see. Oh, that was from you.
Yeah. I don't have the link to your live stream or.
Well, if you go on my channel, just go on Prince of Queens and
on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a second.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So hopefully we have a few viewers at this point. I'm not really sure, but yeah. So you guys feel free to ask questions. But I sent him a variety of questions already, and so I suppose we could get started with that type of thing first, and then perhaps, unfortunately, I can't be reading out loud my questions even, so you're going to have to rehash them as you answer, which is putting a lot of burden on you, I realize, but, hey.
No, that's fine. I just actually accessed the live feed, so I can see it now. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So, what is your general background for people who are entirely unfamiliar with you, and how did you, I noticed in rewatching your speech from the ICMI, you actually did women's rights advocacy back in Turkey, where you're from.
Yes, to some extent. Okay, so in terms of academic background, I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology, and which was kind of interesting because it was actually a female-dominated field. I believe, yes, I was studying molecular biology and genetics, which is kind of like a specific branch, and we had maybe like a cohort of 40 students, and I believe we had maybe like 5 or 6 male students in that cohort. But I think my interest in gender relations in general, that mostly boils down to my kind of like reading of Warren Farrell's, literature, especially The Myth of Male Power, which was actually the book that I was reading while I was crossing the Atlantic 5 years ago. So it was very symbolic. It left a strong impact on me. I'm actually Warren Farrell's editor right now, so we are working on updating The Myth of Male Power.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I definitely want to get back to your story, but what type of updates are going to be in that? Like, how is it going to change?
The book, so Warren is interested in, updating some of the cultural references because, there are things like advertisements from, that are a little bit dated and things like that. So we haven't yet finished that conversation about how exactly he wants to change the book. But that was one comment that he made. I want, some of the cultural references updated. Of course, a lot of stuff has happened since the publication of that book. I'm not sure if things have been getting better or worse. Probably worse, I think, since the publication of the book. But at the same time, there were significant cultural milestones about men's rights, so he wants to incorporate some of those things into the book. He also wants to fuse, I guess, the myth of male power to some extent with the boy crisis, which focuses on younger men who, experience hardships in the education sector.
Yeah. One of the
shift the focus from adult men to younger men in the education system.
One of the things that I like to say about if I sense that somebody is reluctant to even speak with an MRA because people have, entirely the wrong conception about what it is actually all about, I will often say things like, well, I'm an advocate for the gender specific issues of men and boys, and that tends to be an easier pill to swallow. And I can point to the certain things about my childhood, for example, that what's interesting actually is I can point to negative things that happened, but I can also point to positive treatment that I was given because I was gay and openly gay in high school. And being openly gay in high school in a very progressive, extremely progressive high school in Seattle actually helped me. I think teachers almost favored me a bit because it's like, oh, you have to be nice to the gay kid, and if anybody teases him, that's really, really bad, and that type of thing, which mostly they didn't, but anyhow, sorry, get back to the Warren Farrell updating.
That's pretty much it. So we are at the very earliest stages of editing new version, so I think it's too premature to make an announcement about that.
Okay.
But yeah, Warren is interested. I've been in communication with a lot of people, so and including Warren. So that's pretty much it. To me, I guess that book was very interesting. And some of the arguments are, they are difficult, like when he argues that unemployment is similar to sexual assault, like unemployment in men is similar to sexual assault in women. I think some of the arguments, I'm not entirely sure, but then there are other arguments which are like very powerful in the book. One of them is, for example, and it's so hard to, you know, ignore, men have been dying in warfare since the beginning of history, so you might as well call warfare sex selective genocide. And it's true. I mean, that was one of the statements, I think, like one of the most powerful statements that I read, because it's true. So you do have compulsory military service in some countries, for example, including Turkey, although you can get a waiver if you have a college degree, or you can serve it like for a shorter time. Although I probably will not be doing it, because both me and my sister are kind of in the process of opting out of Turkish citizenship anyway. So, but interestingly, and I was just like reading up some statistics about the Syrian civil war, and only 11% of all civilians who died in the civil war in Syria are women. So this is in addition to combatants. There were only 6 women who died as combatants in the Syrian civil war. So it's 99%, 99.99% men, you know, who died, and it's a very large number. But even among civilians, the percentage is only 11%. It's actually lower than the number of children who died in the civil war. So yes, less women died in the Syrian civil war than children. So that's also kind of interesting.
Do you have any idea of an explanation for that?
I don't really know. I mean, children are more vulnerable to, you know, illnesses and starvation and things like that. But then, so that's interesting. But there's also a huge disparity between the numbers of men who are dying in the civil war as civilians, as opposed to women who are dying.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And but anyway, so that's one argument. Of course, there's so many others in the book, like the way it is sexual harassment, the way it's set up is really anti-male on a very fundamental basis. Men are not really allowed to accuse women. So I've seen many examples of that. If you try to do that, you get shut down by feminists.
Yeah.
So we have so many examples of that. So first of all, it's very one-sided. The whole victimhood culture that they have created completely favors women. And it's really based on the principle of imposing as many behavioral controls on men as possible, while at the same time really taking away their money and destroying their reputation. So this is what, you know, Me Too has been doing.
Yeah.
Of course, it didn't really start with Me Too. Me Too is really just the latest iteration of the same.
Yeah, that's when they
pathology.
That's when they kicked it into high gear to make some political reputation assassination attempts.
Yeah. So that's it. And I mean, as I spend more and more time, especially in college, and I go to USC, University of Southern California, which is a very, very partisan school. And I was studying English, which is, you know, one of the most extreme leftist/feminist departments in the school. So I got, I guess, like increasingly disillusioned and, you know, almost like disgusted even at kind of like what is going on, because their fundamental assumptions are wrong. So women are not oppressed, you know.
No, they're privileged.
Of course, I mean, in many ways, in so many different ways, they live longer than men. They spend more money than men, which is interesting because there's all this obsession with the wage gap, but it ignores the fact that women actually drive 85% of all spending, and that's because in heterosexual relationships, men usually, and they're ignoring that. Of course, there's so many other things that just don't make sense, like the way feminists argue that women face discrimination in STEM because they're the minority, but they ignore the fact that women are the majority in colleges nationwide. It just makes no sense. There are all these wasteful affirmative action programs to push more and more women into STEM.
Yeah.
But then there are no affirmative action programs to push more men into college. It just makes sense.
When I use the word privileged, I try to stick very definitionally to the word privilege, because a lot of things that are brought up as privileges are really just higher likelihood tipping. I don't know what the correct word isn't coming off the top of my head, but like, for example, men do get raped, not just by women but other men, and women say, oh, men don't have to fear being raped. It's like, well, technically that's actually not true. That isn't a male privilege. That is a male thing that tends to largely be true in certain ways, but women are extraordinarily privileged under the law and systemically. Like, for example, affirmative action. There is no affirmative action for males. There is also the right to bodily autonomy in terms of at birth. There's also the right to know that the cops are going to arrest you if you are being attacked, whereas under the Duluth model, if you are a man that is being attacked by a female in a domestic violence situation, in most places they will arrest you universally. And so that is like, I almost feel, and actually I'm pretty positive of this, that the left very deliberately, because they love to change words, it's like one of their favorite things to do to reframe the conversation. They because when they were trying to argue in favor of affirmative action, that's when they came up with the Peggy McIntosh essay, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack.
Oh, yeah.
And it was all of these things that I think almost universally, I don't think a single one of them was an actual white privilege, because I think even by 1989, when that was written, they had all been dissolved. So I just like making that clear to everybody. And so, I think what you really work with generally is actual female privileges that systemically affect men at universities at this point. And what was the first thing that you did regarding that?
I filed a string of civil rights complaints with the Department of Education. So and they tend to be class action complaints. So I don't really, or you might even call them procedural complaints. I don't really say that I'm the only victim of discrimination. I was mostly using myself as, almost as a test case to, demonstrate that it's not just my problem, but, the problems experienced by men as a class. So I think that has been a common feature of all these civil rights complaints that I have filed so far. So I filed several. The first one was, I guess, like, I basically approached the federal government with the argument that the University of Southern California was discriminating against men on a collective scale when it comes to sexual harassment disputes. So against both male accusers and accused males. That complaint has a long, complicated history. At first, it was filed as an individual complaint. It was accepted. Then I filed it as a class action case, arguing that it wasn't just me, but men as a class who suffered harm or discrimination.
Did something happen to you? Sorry.
I was involved in a sexual harassment dispute with a female martial artist, who broke up with her fiance to pursue me instead. But somehow, she managed to spin herself as the victim because, she's of course like female, and female privilege just trumps everything else in academia. So I wasn't suspended or expelled at that time, but still, the fact that there was such she also accused me of sexual harassment because, in her words, he was manipulating my emotions and lying to me by telling me that he was not attracted to me. So she tried to formulate this idea that because I told her that I was unattracted to her, that I wanted to cut off all contact. That was a form of emotional manipulation, which was a form of sexual harassment. Now, as insane as this may sound, I was sanctioned with counseling for this. And the reason, like the way these disputes work at the university, if you're male and if you get into any kind of sexual harassment dispute with a woman, if the woman is like utterly batshit crazy, then you get sanctioned with something like sensitivity training or like one-time counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no such thing as sanctions against false accusers, or there's really no such thing as complete vindication, no matter how crazy the allegations are. But that's only if you can disprove what she's saying and present material evidence. If there's any ambiguity, then they just expel the guy. Mm-hmm. So that's really the current system at the University of Southern California. I know that many other institutions are bad, and there's been a lot of like criticism against this campus sexual harassment tribunals, but I think USC is one of the absolute worst ones. I think I will say definitely in the top 10 when it comes to the whole, I guess, like national picture. I've read cases from other schools, and some of them are like really quite crazy and unfair as well, but USC is just a different beast altogether. So I filed a complaint. It was investigated for a long time. The allegations were found to be in good faith and objectively reasonable by one attorney. And then it's complicated. I filed a different complaint alleging that affirmative action programs for women were discriminatory against men because men are now the minority. So the same regional office dismissed that complaint. I believe this was 9/18/2031 was the docket number for this new complaint. So I appealed that to the Trump appointees, the individuals who, like basically Republicans are appointed by Donald Trump in the Washington headquarters, and they granted the appeal. So the university was now under a second investigation for offering scholarships and preferences to women for the majority. And that just like drove them crazy because, they are really this establishment liberals who hate, Republicans. So there was a lot of political conflict there. So even though they found it objectively reasonable previous to that, they dismissed the complaint. They wrote like outrageous dismissal letter. And then I filed an ethics complaint against the former regional director. Her name is Laura Fire, who dismissed that complaint. That was 9/16/21/28 was the docket number. And she had to resign from her position. And that was fairly interesting. I think one of the questions you asked me, what is your most important accomplishment?
Yeah.
I would say that's one of the top 5 or maybe like top 3 is the former regional director of the San Francisco office. This is a sub-agency of the Department of Education charged with enforcing civil rights laws. The San Francisco chapter is basically the most aggressively feminist one. And the regional director, Laura Fire, was, what some people might call a true believer, a fanatical feminist. So she had to resign from, and she has jurisdiction. It's crazy. One unelected bureaucrat has jurisdiction over 40 million people in California. That's insane. I mean, that's just crazy in and of itself. But anyway,
the feminist lobbying groups fought to make it that way, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, they have this bottleneck thing where like a single feminist tries to control everything.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she had to resign. I filed an ethics complaint with the Inspector General of the Department of Education, and she had to resign from her position. I wasn't the only one who was who had concerns about her. I was in communication with other parents of male students, who had strong grievances against Laura Fire, similar to mine. And there were other things. She wrote a resolution letter against Stanford University in which she wrote that the reasonable person standard violates Title IX. And of course, like that's bullshit crazy, but it also shows...
to clarify what the reasonable person's standard is.
I mean, the reasonable person's standard is, for example, this is obvious. If a woman is saying, I'm a victim of sexual harassment because my boyfriend was manipulating my emotions and lying to me by telling me that he was not attracted to me, that's not a claim that will survive the reasonable person standard.
Okay, yeah, I get it now. Oh yeah, Tim Pool calls that the laughing test, and
you could say that, yeah.
It's kind of like what she's basically doing is advocating in favor of something like trauma theory, which is very, very counterintuitive. Yes. And it's basically like, oh, when people have traumas, they do things that are the exact opposite of what you think that you would do because we're feminists, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think the trauma-informed theory, especially the way that it has been applied by feminists, first of all, it makes no sense. People who perceive themselves to be in danger actually experience stronger memories. Yeah, they actually have like better.
Yeah, adrenaline kicks in.
Yeah, of course. So that's ridiculous in and of itself, but it's something like that. So she was basically trying to encourage all sexual harassment complaints, including even the most outrageous, batshit crazy ones, which is why, you know, she was trying to get rid of this reasonable person standard. There were other things, but so she had to resign from her position. The complaint is currently on appeal, so I don't know what's going to happen to that. But there are other complaints pending. One of them is against the University of Southern California, so it involves scholarships. It's mostly scholarships for women in business, women in STEM, things like that, and it's a substantial amount of money, I believe.
Oh God, sorry, my headset keeps disconnecting. I don't know why. It's very strange. Okay, talk.
Can you hear me?
Oh no, I made it worse. Hold on. Okay. Oh, now I can hear through my headset. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you, I think. Sorry.
I'm
gonna bring up a second article. The one from Campus Reform is what I'm going to be.
That's fine.
Okay. Just because there's been a lot of stories written about this nice young man. So.
I'm 31 years old, so I'm not sure if I'm that young. But
you're younger than I am.
Okay.
So, sorry, keep going with what you were saying about this. You were talking about a newer story or a newer issue.
So the second complaint that was accepted is, and it actually established a national federal precedent, which is, I guess, like why it's significant, because when it was first dismissed, it was dismissed on the grounds that, again, affirmative action for women in the disciplines where they're the minority is acceptable, meaning that if women are the minority in business school or STEM school, it's okay to have scholarships for women. And I responded to that by saying, women are the majority of all college students nationwide, so that makes no sense. And colleges do not offer any affirmative action programs for men, where they are the minority. We don't have affirmative action programs for men in nursing, humanities, social work, like things like that. And men are also the minority of medical students and law students in today's world. So that's another important point. Anyway, so that argument was accepted. So that complaint was accepted or reinstated on appeal. I will say that this is 9/18/2031. So, and it's still pending. And then the Department of Education accepted a different complaint against Yale University. And that was kind of like a psychological breakthrough, I think, because Yale is a major academic institution. It's one of the largest academic corporations on the planet. So it was under investigation by, arguably the most powerful country in the world. So I think that got a lot of publicity, and not all of it was positive. At first, there was a wave of positive publicity from campus reform, college fix.
Okay.
Boxing,
I'm gonna
and
let's. Oh, sorry. Keep talking about the wave.
and then I received a wave of negative coverage. But you were saying something.
Oh, I was just going to say, let's look down at what they're saying. So, U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights has opened an investigation into alleged anti-male discrimination in several Yale University initiatives. The investigation was prompted by you. Well, quickly, what are some examples of the things that they were doing?
USC, for example, has a Birdie Corbett scholarship for $7 million for women in business, even though female students are now the majority of business students, but they're still offering it.
Wow.
USC has a VICE program for $20 million, at least, and that's to increase the number of women in STEM, to offer support to women in STEM, even though, again, there are no similar programs for men in the disciplines when they're the minority. There are new allegations pending. USC offers a conference for women, on an annual basis. There's nothing similar for men. And USC also has some kind of research lab which just focuses on the health problems of women with nothing equivalent for men. And although those are new pending allegations, they have not yet been accepted. With Yale, there were 17 items that I was alleging bias against, and 7 of them were accepted, 10 of them were dismissed at that time. And that investigator actually applied a very high bar when it comes to pleading discrimination. He's like, basically, unless it very explicitly said this is just for women only, or unless it very explicitly said women can apply, they dismissed the allegations. So they kind of raised the bar, I think, with the Yale complaint. But still, like, some of the programs that are under investigation are very major programs. They involve a lot of funding. So that complaint is pending. There was another complaint against Tulane University. And Tulane has an institute called Newcomb College Institute, which is an endowment of $40 million. So that was probably the most significant one. And that complaint has been resolved. So technically, Tulane now has to open that endowment and, all the fellowships and their programs to both men and women. But they're trying to work around that. So one thing that they're doing is now I think they nominally have to open the programs to both men and women, but they're still keeping the focus on feminism. So they're basically expecting men to sit in this like long training, brainwashing sessions where they will be brainwashed into accepting the fundamental assumptions of feminism.
Oh, so men need to be trained not to rape. I mean, let's be realistic.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Unfortunately, they are trying to sidestep the substantive issue by trying to come up with a excuse. So, and that really sucks. But at the same time, there's only so much that you can do from afar. I mean, it's in a different state, and there's very little control that you can exercise over the investigative mechanism. It's not that similar to the litigation process. So, but that's it. And then other people started filing similar complaints. Mark Perry, who is a scholar with the American Enterprise Institute, has filed, I think, dozens of complaints after that time. There are others. I know that individuals that I've never communicated with have filed complaints.
Wow.
There's one complaint against UCLA filed by a female scientist who basically challenged this female on the programs.
So you started the ball rolling.
Kind of, yes. So the Yale complaint, I think because it generated a lot of publicity and because people were notified that they can file complaints, I think it just hit the Department of Education with a large number of complaints. And then I myself filed a different complaint against Cornell University. And I guess I would definitely say the filing of that complaint was, one of my major victories. It was signed by many people. There were 193 signatories in the end, including household names like Jordan Peterson was a signatory, Lauren Farrell, Christina Hoff Summers, many other individuals.
I'm gonna look up for this.
Lawrence Alexander, who's a law professor, and many others. Lionel Tiger, who's also very well known. So there was a lot of like activism. So about that. So the Cornell complaint, and it also generated a lot of publicity. The campus reform article got, I think, 10,000 shares on Facebook. I don't know how many reads or views that amounts to, but I think it might mean something like hundreds of thousands of people, read the article. I know that.
Yeah.
So it got a lot of attention. And then Glenn Reynolds published an article on USA Today about the Cornell complaint, and that complaint has consistently ranked the highest on Google. When you type in men Title IX or male Title IX from among, anywhere between 60 to 90 million results, it's been ranking consistently the highest. So, it's been getting a lot of attention, and I don't know how exactly Google's rankings work, but and getting positive publicity like that is very difficult when it comes to men's rights. But the USA Today article has, it's gotten a lot of favorable. It's basically got like a favorable Google ranking. So I will just give me a second. I want to warm up my tea.
No worries.
I'll be back in 15 seconds.
Spacepan will be on in a second. So
yes. So
okay.
If you want, you can keep asking questions, or
well, I think that we've gotten the general gist of what you do as an individual, but recently, right after the conference, in fact, you things kind of ran south for you with your program. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've had like a series of escalating problems, with the left-wing academics in my institution. So it started when they placed me under a probationary contract, and I was the only student from among a pool of, I think, 110 instructors. I was the only one under a probationary contract. And then I was the only one to be deprived of my stipend again. And I think they were like escalating these things as their way of showing, if you don't give up, we will eventually expel you. So it eventually got to that point, unfortunately. So and they terminated my PhD. So I'm graduating with a master's. This is my third college degree. I mean, I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology. I have a previous Master of Arts in English, and now I have a third degree, which is my second Master of Arts, also in English from USC. And I'm going to appeal the results. I don't know if it will, lead to any positive results, but yeah.
So, well, I'm hearing feedback.
Yeah, it's my give me a second.
Oh, okay.
It's my crazy microwave making the funny sound.
Oh, that's funny. What was I going to say? Oh, so, yeah, that's really unfortunate. But you have a GoFundMe going on.
Yes.
Because you said you're not going down without a fight, which I commend you for. I hope that please post it in the chat, and I will post it in under the description when the stream is over. And this is for legal expenses, I presume?
Yes. So at this point, I'm still trying to figure out what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's partially for legal expenses and partially to make up, I guess, like for my lost stipend, because I did a lot of pro bono work, and so professional lawyers do not really want to file the civil rights complaints because it does not generate any money. So you're asking for injunctive relief that will change, the parameters, or that will make the world a better place for men. But I wasn't asking for damages for myself in any of these cases. So first of all, like, there are no damages to be collected, and then the effort that you put into the complaints is just immense. The coalition complaint required, almost 200 signatures, and some of those signatures required a negotiation process where they do not consent to their signature unless either like you clarify some aspect of the complaint, or it's a long process. And even writing there's a lot of research to be done and things like that. And I wrote complaints sometimes for other individuals, kind of like as a pro bono. So it's for all of that, and I guess like as a kind of like a threshold, it was for the amount that they deprived me of my stipend. The annual stipend that I would have received is $35,000 per year.
Wow.
Which is money that they cut off. So without that right now, I don't really know how to keep going on.
Yeah.
I just got into like a new job, but then when I do that, when I just focus on my job, then I have absolutely no time to do any of the other stuff. So, yeah.
That's really intense.
And it's interesting, like if you look at the scholarships that are given to like students in humanities, is for all kinds of ridiculous things. Like if you're a feminist student who's spouting intersectional dogma, or just like write really bad SJW poetry, then you get fellowships and all of that. But if you have the opinions, and even if you're doing very hard pro bono work, they will punish you. Well, that's just part of the ideological conformity on college campuses today.
Yeah, well, the thing is that, like, intersectionality is really just about control, and it's about control for very sinister reasons. I sent you a link to the video, but you definitely didn't have time to watch it because it's an hour long. But I made a video that took a lot of research. A lot of research went into it, both reading and actual books, which YouTubers rarely do. I actually took a year's time to make sure I really read some books and studied up on it. It's called Intersectional Feminism is Communist Particle Board, and it absolutely is undeniable that what is known as intersectional feminism is entirely rooted in the United States Communist Party and the type of thing that they were talking about often prior to World War II. And the thing is about feminism is that it initially used to just be female supremacy, period. That's what it was. And then after World War II, the Cold War began, and so you couldn't really be a part of the Communist Party anymore. It never really went away, but what happened was a lot of people shifted to anti-war stuff, the Black Civil Rights Movement, and then the women's movement. And the women's movement was what first established itself with academic legitimacy. And so basically, like, women's studies departments were a bunch of female communists. And
that is true, yeah.
Yeah, and they have this big push going on right now. And, I suspect, but this is just, this is in the realm of a conspiracy theory, so I want to just make that clear. But I suspect somehow China is in on it. But I'm just going to throw that out there.
Conspiracy theory, that's interesting. There's actually Peter Wood, who's the president of the National Association of Scholars, which is like the only organization, I think, that is aimed at, protecting libertarian-leaning academics. He actually, he persuaded Senator Cruz to pass, a bill. So this happened in the, it's not an executive, it's like a legislation, I think, and to eliminate Confucius studies, which are kind of similar, and they are funded by China.
What are they?
They are called Confucius studies. They are funded by China, and they really,
like Confucius, the philosopher, yes. The Chinese.
Yes, the sage, the Chinese sage. Of course, it has nothing to do with his philosophy or anything. So it's just, I think, communist propaganda. They actually prevent dissidents from the Chinese government, like dissidents who oppose the Chinese government. On some occasions, they have actually lobbied to veto their visas. So you have this, Chinese students in the United States who are working to terminate the visas of dissidents who are trying to leave China. So
wow,
I know that's pretty like devious, but that's Confucius studies. I don't think women's studies do not receive their funding from external entities. They receive their funding directly from the federal government.
Well, yeah, largely, yeah.
In terms of the ideology that they propagate, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just pick up any book that they're teaching, and it's just right over there. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's feminism/communism.
Yeah.
It's just so obvious. They say things like heterosexuality is like fundamentally unnatural. They're almost like they say things like what's the name of that lesbian, Adrienne Rich?
Andrea Dworkin?
No, Adrienne Rich. This is like a lesbian. So she has like a famous essay about compulsory heterosexuality and the lesbian experience or something like that. This is like mandatory reading for all incoming women's studies students.
Well, that's
they learn that actually lesbianism is the purest form of feminism, and men are, of course, like oppressors and things like that. And NBC recently ran an article about how heterosexuality is no longer working, how women should turn to lesbianism because Miley Cyrus broke up with her boyfriend, and a lot of people made fun of it. It was like such a stupid article, but it was published by NBC nonetheless.
Yeah.
That's one aspect. Another thing is like they
but wait, I want to make something clear though, because
yes.
One of the things that is that I've talked about a lot, I've actually made an entire video called Antifa is anti-gay. The far left has really, at least within the very, very, extreme cities and locations, like Portland and Seattle and stuff. And there's reasons for this. They have really turned very, very anti-gay male, not so much lesbian, but the people that they are really in favor of is the non-binary people. Like, that's who they want everybody to be. And that makes sense with Frederick Engels' work around the origin of the family, private property, and the state. Because he wanted to rid the world of gender roles, essentially. And communist leaders have hated gay men in particular very, very much. And that whole thing seems to be coming back. I don't know, maybe it's just marriage that they're against largely. It's hard to say, so I just want to make that clear.
I'm sorry. So you're saying that feminists hate gay men?
Oh yeah. I've done a lot of videos about it. I think
it depends on which position that they're taking, and maybe we can discuss that separately. The only thing that I wanted to emphasize is that this idea that the family, the nuclear family,
the family they hate, yes.
Yes, it's the core of all oppression. So that's like really like a limerick that they have been repeating for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Oh wait, hold on. Spacepan, are you here?
Yeah, I just got in here, and then everyone was bashing communists, so I figured,
oh hey,
I'm cool with that. So I wasn't gonna interrupt. But yeah, it's good to be here. Yeah, Prince, you need to use your fingers when you count hours.
Well, you need to not ask me to like do the math when you can go to the same website that I do, because I wasn't by my computer anyway. So
let's see. Is it? Oh, it is 4. Okay. Yeah, that's true. I should never trust that. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't remember what okay. Anyhow, sorry.
Yeah, I recall Spacepan from the conference. Hey, this is great. Yeah. It was nice meeting you there. That was when after I met Miles Kinslow, he was like, "Hey, so people are having like a room party. Want to come?" And I was like, "Okay." And then it was you and Andrew and Kyle, and then I forgot the woman's name who was there. I was like just trying to remember it.
Yeah, you are so sexist, but I do not recall her name either.
I know, right? How awful of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was saying that it's really the hate against the nuclear family that's the strongest, I think. So
absolutely,
they believe the family is, it's oppressive, heteropatriarchy, blah blah blah. So, and because it's really interesting. You have all these women who are marrying men and then divorcing them, and getting all this like massive divorce settlements, basically like fucking these guys over, but somehow it's still oppressive to women. I don't really understand the logic, but again, like these are feminists that we are talking about, so you can't really expect, I guess, like a high rigorous level of reason from them. So
yeah, I think that's part of it. Really, is a lot of it's very emotional and fleeting. So when you try to kind of reverse engineer the logic of it, you just give yourself a headache.
Yeah. And it really, they begin with the assumptions that they want to enforce, and then if they see any evidence that goes against their initial assumptions, which is the idea that we are living in a patriarchy, then they will just ignore that.
Yeah, so or make
talking to a wall. Like sometimes discussing with this like radical feminists is like talking to a wall. Like you put all the facts in front of them and they just ignore it. Their brains cannot process that data.
They just start insulting you, or they have ways of excusing things like, 78% of suicides are male. Well, that's only because women fail at killing themselves, but they try more often. It's like, okay, even if that's true, which it's not actually, that came from a very, very, very small sample size, and it was from a hospital that apparently included self-harm in the same category as all suicide attempts. So, but it's like, even if that were true, you just still don't care that men are succeeding at all. Like, what?
Yeah, I mean logic is not really their forte. So
well, the more sinister thing that I don't even know if it's logic. I mean, it is like, feminists aren't very smart people, like, let's face it, but I also do think that a lot of work has been put into the clever crafting of their dishonesty. And I think that it is just a means to an end. Like, they kind of play dumb a lot of the time. So
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of intentional duplicity in the movement. So and I don't think it's not just being naive. They are being purposefully dishonest. And part of the reason that they've been successful is that they are really good at creating bottlenecks where they can control the exchange of information the federal government and especially the press. That's one reason. And the press, I think in particular, has been it's becoming increasing, like lurching towards, I think, like more and more feminism. There has been some improvement about men's rights coverage over the last few years, I think. We've seen some interesting developments, but generally speaking, there's a massive bias in favor of feminism. And I think that's because journalism is female majority, and of course, many of them, again, get the typical feminist brainwashing before they graduate. So yeah, that's...
Well, there is an actual specific thing that is going on right during this time period, because everybody is starting to become aware that feminism is not actually cool and that people are sick to death of it. Like the audience is, like if you look at the audience rating for things like Dave Chappelle or whatever, but there's an actual specific thing going on with politics and with media, and there's this company called Media Matters, and they are funded in part by George Soros, and what they do is they coordinate media narratives by how like the same untrue story will come out on numerous different publications so on the same day. Well, there's an actual reason for that. It's like, wait, how did this fake thing, like how did they all spontaneously report on this fake thing at the same time? Well, the Media Matters sends out memos to a bunch of companies that they work with in a professional capacity, and Media Matters crafts those narratives. And there was like a big, several pages long. I've been through most of it because it leaked, and it basically outlined how they were going to undermine the Trump presidency for the next four years at every turn. And they basically just went with the strategies that they had available with them when they decided to do this. So they started obviously writing this right as soon as he won, and it obviously feminism seems like the thing to do. I think honestly, the Democrats are just such scumbags. They do every dirty trick and cheat method, and they have seemingly for a long time, like every duplicitous, dishonest, manipulative thing to win elections. I think they bank on getting the most support from women, which is why they pander to them, because they know that if they didn't do that, they'd never win elections because they're so wretched.
Yes, that's the thing. There are actually more female registered voters than male voters, right? So it's been a winning strategy for them for quite some time.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like it was inevitable. Like, I think that just with the way that the democratic system works, it's just inevitable that, a party that comes out as dominant is going to have, all of those characteristics. And then who is their major competitor? The Republicans, who are basically just Democrat light,
No, that's true. I mean, and unfortunately, within the Republican Party itself, you don't always get strong resistance to the Democratic narrative. So unfortunately, a lot of Republicans are really lazy or just lethargic. They don't really put up like a major resistance to, I think, some of the central claims or like the central assumptions of the Democratic Party. I mean,
it's always the Democrat narrative, but slightly less.
Further discussion about the Kavanaugh hearings, but there were Republicans who wanted to throw him under the bus. So not everyone was on board. I think before Trump kind of consolidated support behind Kavanaugh, there were actually quite a few people who were saying we should just throw him under the bus. We should replace him with, candidate with better PR. That's what they were saying. And it wasn't just a few individuals. There was like one influential attorney who is actually sympathetic to men's rights, and he was also saying that Kavanaugh should be replaced by a different candidate who has better PR, because it might lead to a decrease in votes and things like that. So But eventually he won, and I'm very glad. I was very supportive of his nomination process.
Yeah.
And a lot of accusations really fell apart. So some of them are so stupid that they are like, even the press just stopped toying with them. I think Christine Ford was the only one who was entertained seriously, and that's not because her claims make any sense, because they don't.
No.
But it's because of who she is. Like, she's a Stanford professor, etc. Has all the academic credentials, which is kind of interesting because academia is just this way of creating a facade of credibility for the Democrats at this point, where they are the absolute majority. But it helps them to perpetuate this myth that they're better educated, that they are more sophisticated than conservatives. It does help them immensely. Like, the massive advantage that they have in academia helps Democrats immensely, I think.
Wasn't there an actual thing with Christine Blasey Ford where she was caught lying about because she was a psychology professor? It was like, now I think I'm getting this slightly wrong, but like
she's not a psychology professor. I think she is some kind of biostatistician.
Okay, but I think they asked her some question along the lines of like, have you ever gotten training for taking a lie detector test or something like that, and they caught her lying about that later or something like that.
They caught her lying about a lot of things. I mean, she said, "I'm afraid of flying."
Oh yeah,
they published all these records showing that she would fly to Hawaii very regularly. Milo Yiannopoulos ran a very funny, video about her. I can send the link, or I can post it here. But it's just like completely devastating, I think.
Yeah, well, no, she even testified in front of the prosecuting, or like the defense attorney, rather. The woman, acted very nice to her, but was slipping in all sorts of questions about, do you fly frequently, or like when was the last time you flew, and was saying these very subtly. And so she said on the Senate floor that she did actually fly fairly frequently, and so that was really where it was given away.
Oh yeah, I mean, I posted the link, so it's really, I think it's really great. So Milo is just like doing a spoof of her allegations.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really funny, but it was really spot on as well, I think. Mm-hmm. So that's it. You posted some questions. Do you want me to read them and just like answer them one by one? Or
yeah, we might have been through them, but you could do that. Like, so yeah, let's start with the first one. I mean, I feel like
let me see. What would you say was your biggest success? I think the Yale complaint really broke a psychological barrier. The fact that the federal government can investigate, a major academic corporation for discrimination against men, I think that really broke a psychological barrier. Mm-hmm. I would say that was one of my most important successes. The other complaint, the USC complaint, which was originally dismissed and then reinstated on appeal, I think that broke another psychological barrier as well, and it did establish that men are a minority as a federal precedent. So
yeah, that's huge.
Complaints, they were important. The Cornell complaint was important because it demonstrated, and that again, like the people who signed it are like specialist lawyers, like law professors, think tank presidents, like authors. So there was a lot of support. I don't know what will happen. I don't know if we will eventually be able to challenge women's studies because there's so much. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's the first time such a significant challenge has been raised. I think that was another important victory. Laura Fires, her resignation was, I think, another important milestone because she exercised so much control over the regional. Branch of the agency. I don't really know. I think those are kind of like some of the major.
yeah. I think we went through I mean, you kind of like just sort of repeating all the ones you felt a need to talk about. So I think we can move on to the next question.
Let me see. Which area or areas do you think there's the most potential for further success? That's interesting. I think it's been almost granted at this point that female-only scholarships, but non-athletic scholarships, because athletic scholarships are subject to a different system of inquiry. But non-athletic scholarships, like scholarships for women in STEM, women in business, women in journalism, even though they are, they're the majority in many disciplines, but you still get a lot of programs. Women are the majority of students in medicine and law, and you still have all these support groups, scholarships, consortiums, blah blah, like to support women who are the majority, which just makes no sense whatsoever. I think they will go. So at this point, it has become increasingly difficult for feminists to defend their position, because one thing that they did to dismiss the complaints was they were saying you need to find men who specifically apply to these programs and who specifically receive rejections before we can process these complaints. So some feminists in the Department of Education were making that argument, but then, first of all, it's stupid, and a lot of people recognize that. No man is ordinarily going to apply to a program which says, well, this is women in medicine. It makes no sense. It's silly. And another reason is I just finished running a massive synthetic analysis of the Obama administration's record on Title IX issues. The results are scheduled to be published, I think, probably next week. I read 255 resolution letters. It's a lot of reading, more than 1 million words. And I did like a really extensive spreadsheet. And one thing that I found is the Obama administration had no problem with launching investigations, even in the absence of any particular grievance or any particular woman complaining or any particular woman who is the victim of discrimination, as long as they suspected that the school might be, from their end, biased against women. So there were complaints of an entirely procedural nature, so in which you have no identifiable victim, but you have some procedures that they didn't like, so they launched investigations. And based on that precedent, it's not very difficult for them to argue that we are going to dismiss these complaints unless you can identify applicants. Because if they do that, then it becomes possible to sue the Department of Education in federal court. If the same rule applies in such an obvious, if they're applying such obvious double standards to, civil rights enforcement, then it becomes possible to criticize them or even sue them. So that's one thing. Another thing is, well, they were arguing, with women's studies, and this is interesting. They were saying that Title IX cannot be used in a manner which will interfere with curricular materials. And of course, like the feminists were saying, this is an academic freedom issue. Like, we don't want the federal government micromanaging, curricular materials or, teaching materials and things like that. In and of itself, it's a meaningful argument. But then again, we found all these records showing that the feminists had no problem whatsoever with manipulating curricular materials and also training materials in order to, eradicate what they perceive to be anti-female discrimination. And the numbers are really shocking. The department was 24 times more likely to side with women whenever there was a dispute between a male party and a female party. So those also really shocking. When it comes to athletic complaints, so athletic, like men alleging discrimination in athletics versus women making the same allegations, the department was 36 times more likely to side with women than men. There are 36 complaints which ended with favorable resolution letters for women, for female athletes, whereas there's only one that was favorable to male athletes. And then the department wrote resolution letters to side with women who were making allegations of discrimination, grading, retaliation, everything really. So the department was just like engaging in blatant discrimination against men throughout the Obama administration, and of course, many people suspected this.
Oh yeah.
But it's the first time somebody did all the research and dug up all the records and ran all the statistical analysis and actually created material evidence before those allegations can be formally launched. So now they're in an even more difficult spot, I think.
Yeah, there were a number of conspiracy theories. I'm getting feedback again.
You're getting feedback?
Yeah, well, it's an echo.
I don't really know.
Huh.
If I put on my headphones...
if you put on your headphones, that'll probably help.
It gets worse, though, if I put on my headphones.
Well, maybe if you mute yourself while you're not talking. Now I'm not hearing it, though.
Can you repeat that?
I said maybe if you mute yourself while you're not talking, but I'm not hearing myself now. But anyhow, there were multiple conspiracy theories with a fair amount of like circumstantial evidence regarding the potentiality that Obama actually had American journalists that were native born, guys just being assassinated because they were reporting upon him. Like people a lot of people believe that Andrew Breitbart was murdered because he wouldn't shut up about Obama corruption, and he had some really, really juicy stories like the Pigford fraud, which is how Obama helped win the rural South. Like, he probably wouldn't have beat Hillary Clinton in the primaries without defrauding the government and teaching black people in the South, in the rural South, how to claim that they lost their farms, or somehow that I don't remember exactly what the suit that was originally opened up was about, but it was having to do with black farmers, and Obama ended up getting $50,000 for basically anybody who applied for it, and that was how he won the rural black South. And Andrew Breitbart reported upon that a whole bunch and some other stuff, and then he had one of these sort of mysterious heart attacks that people don't seem to believe, but I haven't looked up into that one too much. But there's this other one, I don't want to tell the whole story, but regarding the guy who, did you know that Obama legalized the usage of propaganda on the American people?
No.
Yeah, I can send you a video I made about it. It's actually...
Sure, yeah, that would be great. I was muting my microphone.
Oh, no problem.
I don't know if it was helping, but...
Okay. Well, yeah, he legalized the usage of propaganda on the American people in 2012, and I think it went into effect in 2013, and the guy who broke that story died in a mysterious car accident that could have potentially be from a remote car hack, which so anyhow, yeah, people might have just been... I
don't really know anything particular about those issues, so I cannot really say anything, but I can say that the Obama administration's Department of Education was engaging in blatant gender discrimination against men.
Yeah.
But perfectly and utterly aware of what they were doing. So I think I can say that, like, beyond the shadow of a doubt. So let me. Anyway, what I was gonna say, and this is like a real long-winded answer. Which area or areas do you think there's the most potential for further success? I think female-owned scholarships are going to disappear. So, and these are non-athletic scholarships, and this may seem like a non-issue, but it's still, the total amount nationwide is probably more than, I don't really know, it might be like close to 1 billion. So, and it will also become illegal, I think, for institutions to advertise like female-owned scholarships on their websites, which may also have a negative effect on scholarships that are offered by external entities. So it will no longer be legal to publish them on college websites and things like that. So it will become more and more difficult. to offer female-only scholarships.
Okay.
And I think some other things. So there's like some improvements. So some things have changed, and when it comes to due process, that's tough because like the final guidelines still have not been published. But I know that the system changed a little bit for the better. But now there are lawyers who are suing colleges for massive amounts of money for like victims' rights.
Oh God.
In quotation marks. So I don't really know.
Huh.
It's hard to predict the future.
So, for the record, we should get through these questions if we want to have time to talk about any other stuff, because we usually we have 45 minutes left since we started about an hour and 15 minutes ago. So we usually don't go much over 2 hours. I would appreciate if you sort of powered through these. And I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick, but keep talking. Spacepan is here. And I'll be away from the computer, going to the bathroom. I'm going to be smoking on the deck, but I will have the volume up, so I'll be able to hear you guys, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Okay, sorry.
So the next question is, what has been your biggest disappointment during your time as an advocate for male rights regarding your personal work? Oh, no, there's another question. What do you see as the biggest obstacle against men's rights and fair treatment for males on university campuses, aside from culture? That's also tough. I mean, culture is kind of a vague term, and it's so embedded, like this kind of ideology is so embedded on college campuses at this point that I don't really know.
Yeah, that makes it a tricky question, doesn't it? It kind of takes a lot off the table.
Other than culture.
I would say gynocentrism, but that's kind of the answer to everything.
One thing is there's a huge asymmetry between like somebody just typed something.
Is that you typing? Oh, okay.
Yes. There's a huge disparity between, well, what some might call association rights. So colleges endorse, promote, and foster all kinds of female-only organizations and groups on college campuses. So it's not just women's studies. You have so many other things like conferences for women, women's consortiums, like President's Council for Women. They have like so many different names, like Women's Advancement Center, blah, blah, blah. So there are so many different variations, and some of them have been listed, for example, in the Cornell complaint. However, the same feminists who so aggressively defend these programs are also doing their best to eliminate male-only programs or anything like male-only, even fraternities, even though they are purely social organizations. They are now on the chopping block by feminists who want to abolish them because they just cannot tolerate the idea that there are a bunch of men who are coming together to, discuss their issues or even sympathize with each other on any level. That's considered a thought crime or a hate crime under feminist theology these days. So, and that's kind of interesting. So feminists do not really want men to collaborate with each other, to sympathize with each other, to, come together and like work as a group.
Well, what's interesting about it is it kind of models their patriarchy theory, except they're the ones perpetrating it, right? They're creating their own little patriarchy, right? And then using that head start in order to stop any male counterpart to it.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I just received a comment on the live feed. Yes. So feminists have actually eliminated Boy Scouts. So Patricia said, did you hear about feminazis trying to eliminate Boy Scouts? But they already did eliminate Boy Scouts in some sense, because Boy Scouts are now just scouts. So they have become gender neutral. Girls can join. but Girl Scouts are still Girl Scouts, so boys cannot join. And that really reflects the double standards that have come to permeate the entirety of American society, and this is intentional. I had a discussion with Lisa Wade once. So she's this like radical feminazi at Occidental College, and she gave like this like long, boring speech, and during which like she pontificated that male-only organizations are dangerous for women because, in her words, they create a scarcity mentality that women are somehow like scarce resources, and this prompts men to rape women. It's absurd, it's stupid, but that was what she was saying. So male-only organizations encourage men to rape women. This is what she was saying. Whereas female-only organizations actually help women to advance their educational goals, where they can just it creates a space safe from harassment, and because they tie everything to harassment, so it actually helps them to advance academically. So this is intentional. They want to abolish all male-only programs while they want to preserve female-only programs. And the reason they're doing this is because those female-only programs get funding from the federal government that just like gets funneled into all these like feminist issues. And also it creates a sense of collaboration or fellowship on the basis of sex. Like when you have a bunch of men who attend a fraternity, like they're going to fight each other, of course, like they're going to disagree on things, but ultimately it's going to create some sense of fellowship or like fraternity. That's what the whole idea is about. And of course, like female-owned organizations create the same effect, which is why they are purposefully eliminating all male-owned organizations and expanding these female-owned organizations, even though men are the minority in colleges.
Yeah, and it goes back to how education is just kind of becoming this like fake credential, and also this like just echo chamber of all the things that they think.
Yeah,
because you feel more towards kind of the more left-leaning, more progressive women.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really interesting. Like they do their best to sabotage any kind of collaboration between men on the basis of sex, like any kind of like men's rights group or any kind of like similar group will get sabotaged immediately on college campuses when you try to form one.
Yeah,
so they do this all the time.
I'm back, by the way. I wanted to say, I mean, I think that rape is really just sort of their almost decoy reason. Oh, sorry, I'm unplugging from my headset again. Okay, I think I'm hooked up now. God, I think I need to get new headphones. But I think rape is sort of their decoy reason. But what it really is that the actual goal of contemporary feminism, and maybe probably all feminisms historically, is to create a female totalitarian state, whereas now it's a communist female supremacist totalitarian state, and they just don't want men to have any chance to become empowered because they think that men ruin society. And they from what I can tell, it's like they believe that the only reason communism failed was because it was patriarchal, and so this time we put women in charge and restrict men's rights, and then it will surely make sure it's a woman of color who's in charge of it all, and then it will work.
I mean, of course it's ridiculous, but they believe it, so I don't really know what to say to that. But yeah.
Well, all this, it just reminds me of, like, for some reason, when I was in college, I remember it was some group, it was like this sex-positive feminist group. I don't know if they were explicitly like a women's group, but it was basically run by a bunch of lesbians. And like, I remember one time they had like an event, like a fair sort of a thing, right in the like main student center, right? So you walk into this like basic lobby area, like the first room you walk into when you go into one of the buildings at the college I went to, And like they had this big sex positive fair where they're like handing out condoms and dental dams and like and like they putting condoms on banana. I swear to God, there might have been like condom balloon animals and crap. Like it was just this I'm a fairly like sex positive person. Like I'm definitely not more on the traditional side of things, but like even I found it to be rather vulgar. And the fact that it's like, there's a very large basement area, like just one stairwell away. Like could have just had it like downstairs so it's not like right there in front of the frickin' bookstore. Like
I mean, that's interesting because on one hand they promote this promiscuity, through this, sex positive facade, and a lot of, uber progressive campuses do this, but at the same time, you get men prosecuted for ridiculous things. One of the Title IX investigations that I uncovered while I was reading the Obama administration's record involved a resolution letter in which a male professor was under investigation because the women accused her of staring at her breasts for 3 seconds. So this was the allegation. I can send the resolution letter to you, but this was really the basis of the complaint. She accused her professor of staring at her breasts for 3 seconds.
Maybe he was just thinking and spacing out.
And the federal government, picked this up and investigated this complaint.
That's like if you drop a potato chip, right? You got a 5-second rule where you can still eat it, but your eyes can't gaze on breasts. Or like the threshold is much lower. Right?
That's funny. But there's another one in which a male coach was expelled, and this still wasn't enough, for the feminists in the federal government. He was expelled for sexual harassment because he was making bronze sculpture of a female student. I mean, I don't understand the logistics here. So how do you commit sexual harassment against someone for making bronze sculptures of that person? Like, did this male coach like chain the woman to a wall while she was modeling? I mean, I don't get it. It's so absurd.
Like, was he showing up outside with a big, thing of bronze, or I don't know, like a small and like peeping into her window and working on a sculpture that way or something?
Yeah, like if it's a bronze sculpture of her like sleeping in bed at night, it's not, like through the window looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, no, she was modeling for him, obviously, but it just like the logistics just don't add up. In a recent case against Dartmouth College, again, there's like a female student who accused a professor of sexual harassment, and I mean, the context was she was a victim of sexual harassment in the male professor's hot tub. So, which again raises some very interesting questions, like, did the professor drag this female student into his hot tub? Like, how did she get harassed in the hot tub? Like, it just raises so many questions. Like, did she realize that she was a victim of sexual harassment when she was in the hot tub, or was it after? Did the professor like put a gun to her head and say like, jump into my hot tub or I'm going to fail your grades?
I'm gonna guess she was trying to have sex with him and he said no.
Probably. I mean, I don't really know like the entire story, but just based on what I've read, I saw this that like, well, she was in the professor's hot tub, and it's just like ridiculous. So and they won a settlement for like a massive amount of money, which just makes no sense because it just keeps raising tuition prices. For like students who have to pay tuition are actually shouldering this insane settlement so that it's like princesses can get paid massive amounts of money, so where they can just cure their trauma by, I don't know, just buying a lot of Gucci bags. How does that work? Like, if you win a $1 million settlement to cure your trauma after you have been sexually harassed because someone was making bronze sculptures of you, how does that even compute?
And then you can get a book deal.
Of course, there's that. I mean, the whole thing is just like so irrational. It's so extreme. But unfortunately, this is what happens when you stifle any kind of dissent in academia. Like when people are just like clones of each other, afraid to say anything. And I did get expelled. But by the way, I got expelled from my PhD. So they're giving me my MA. I don't know if I should be grateful or not, but they terminated my PhD. So This is what happens to anyone in academia who, utters these inconvenient truths. Peter Boghossian was banned from conducting research for life. He's a professor of philosophy because he published several articles satirizing women's studies.
Yeah.
He ran a hoax. You may have heard of this.
Yes.
He took a passage from Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf and adapted it into feminist, basically rhetoric. And then he submitted this into feminist journals. And the feminist journals published this without questioning it. And then he faced really ridiculous charges saying that he violated ethics about human subjects. So they're kind of arguing that, I guess, these people who reviewed the article and decided to publish it were harmed in the same manner that a doctor who is conducting experiments on a human subject, would harm the subjects. It makes no sense. It's ridiculous.
By the way, somebody who used to be a gender studies scholar of some sorts said that they came forward recently, and I don't know if they released their name or not, but somehow an article was written about this, and they confessed that they all just kind of made it up as they went along. They're because that's clear. The entire field is just coming up with obscure things to complain about and come up with with not even theories, just conjecture, and then call it a theory.
Well, in a few years, there's that one professor who I think was a gender studies project who had a total Twitter meltdown confessional, where he was just going on and on and on about how I think it was basically he was just a feminist because he was trying to bang his students or whatever. I forget. It involved a lot of things, and it was just really long, drawn out. I guess it just broke.
Yeah.
But I do just want to go back to it's very amusing, the idea of a university banning someone from doing research.
Yeah,
and it's philosophy, right?
Exactly. I was gonna say that. I mean, are they really unaware of how stupid they are, or is it self-reflective stupidity? Are they just I just cannot even wrap my head around that, because it's true. He's a philosopher and he has been banned for life from conducting research. I mean, if I wanted to write a parody of women's studies, I couldn't do something better than what they have done to themselves by banning him. It makes no sense. And how are they going to, what qualifies as philosophical research? If he's thinking as a philosopher, does it qualify as research? Is he supposed to get a robot? Is he supposed to have his brain removed? So it makes no sense.
There's just a knock on the door one day, hey sir, you've been asking why a lot. I mean, be careful.
Yeah, I don't really know. That's really strange. And a lot of people just, express support, he received positive coverage and everything, but they're still not doing anything. And that's a really interesting thing. Leftists are very good at using the press as an instrument, right? As a shaming mechanism against their political opponents, but they themselves do not give a shit. So it doesn't matter, there's a lot of negative articles, as long as they are not legally compelled to do something, they will not do it, because it's almost they lack, these radical feminists, in the absence of a external ethical authority that will compel them, to do something specific, they will never do it on their own. So because they lack conscience, they lack the mechanism whereby they can regulate themselves, or they can filter, and evaluate their own actions. They possess no conscience.
Well, no, yeah, so it's true. I mean, there's actual doctrine based around training leftists to be that way, and it's the one of the must-reads if you're going to be any sort of semi-radical leftist, which is Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky. It's basically, the training manual for how to be cleverly dishonest, especially working with others. And they've convinced themselves that every bit of damage in order to further your cause, which of course is a utopia, is worthwhile collateral damage. So, makes sense.
Yeah.
In a nonsensical kind of way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, unfortunately, it's just like part of the problem, and they never they never hold themselves accountable. So that's another thing. Like they have no concept of shame, really.
Yeah.
And I mean, this has been engineered for quite some time now. One of the cardinal sins of feminism is slut shaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so broad that any woman who commits any kind of sexual infraction, whether that's adultery or making a false rape accusation, or even like sexual violence against men, we shouldn't criticize these women because it will be slut shaming, whatever that means. So they are like very good with manipulating the meanings of or like I guess like you could call it the formula, so that they get to control the discourse, and they're very good at doing this. And unfortunately, conservatives cannot really do the same most of the time. So it's always like they're always on the defensive. It's, I think, highly unusual when you have a conservative who is just like pushing back against them using the same methods. They are not really accustomed to that, and most conservatives are not really accustomed to doing that either, which might be why I've had all these successes over the last several years, because I do the same. Like on a very basic level, I accuse them of discrimination, then that's really their thing. Of course,
yeah,
like but saying that men are a minority in colleges, that's turning leftist rhetoric against itself. That's what I've been doing, and it's defense against that.
It is remarkably effective. I do it all the time in discussions on the internet. When like the second, like let's say we're talking about the Proud Boys, like if and I say I don't like hang out with them. I'm not a Proud Boy or anything, but I've never seen any evidence that they've actually started any fights. They claim people claim so, but it's almost universally a lie if you actually watch the footage. And universally, it's always the Antifa people that start the fights, and they say, "Oh, but," and then they get mad at me, and they're like, "Yeah, but they're racist, they're white supremacists." And I'd be like, "Well, I actually do know a Proud Boy, and he's a black Jewish person." And then they're like, "Oh, well, he's obviously an Uncle Tom." And then I'm like, "Okay, so you're just a big old racist." And I always throw out the allegation racist before they have a chance to accuse me of it, because it takes them for a loop. But I only say it when there's good evidence, like for that. If they were I've noticed that they've scaled it back in terms of trying to use the ridiculous argument of saying like you can't be racist towards white people, or that black people can't be racist, or any racial minority can't be racist. I notice that they don't say that one so much anymore, but like if somebody were to ever say that, I would just be like, no, that's you being a racist. And because the thing is, like, I really do object to this a lot, is how incredibly racist the left is. Like, they are incredibly racist. You can't tell me that people who are so obsessed with seeing the world through race-colored glasses aren't completely racist.
And I mean, okay, I know a different Jewish guy who was also active in Proud Boys. I don't really know anything about the organization, but that's things that both of us know. I guess like Jewish males who were active in the organization. That's really interesting. I think in a political sense, it's true that, of course, allegations of racism and allegations of sexism are tied up. So they are really parallel to each other, even when the parameters are different. But it's interesting. So when I went public with the Yale complaint challenging discrimination against men, I received a lot of hate messages targeting me as a white male, which is kind of interesting. Despite my, like foreign name and everything. And I think it's because the picture that is in the background that I can kind of like see on the YouTube video right now. So Inside Higher Education just posted that picture of me, and I saw one Twitter exchange. So basically, like, what's his race? So that was a question that they were asking, and they just like looked up that picture. They saw like a pale guy, and then I just became an angry white male. And then the newspaper articles and the stuff, I can send you some of these messages. I don't know, like, they're almost entertaining but horrifying at the same time. I was called a white male terrorist. So I was called like a mass shooter for like filing a civil rights complaints against Yale. Of course, I was called a Nazi, and pretty much like the usual, I guess like the rhetorical arsenal, like whatever they have in their rhetorical arsenal. I was called an angry white male whose sense of entitlement cannot be confined by geography, which is kind of interesting insult. Stuff like that. And there were, of course, like things like I should be killed and castrated, that I'm similar to Brett Kavanaugh and Brock Turner, who are,
oh my God, that's so silly. It's just like they're just like chose the name of the person that they were mad at currently. They're like, who he's like? He's like Kavanaugh. In what way?
They're all interchangeable in their perception. Like, if you're a pale-skinned male, you're just interchangeable with everybody else who has ever been, who has ever
falsely accused.
Yeah,
that's the irony, right? They're correct on accident, right? Because like, I am like Brock Turner and Brett Kavanaugh. I'm falsely accused. Like, this is a witch hunt.
I mean, Brock Turner was convicted, whereas like Brett Kavanaugh was not convicted of anything. But I guess that in itself shows a lapse of judgment. They cannot really distinguish between, that really basic distinction. But anyway, so, and the reason I wanted to mention that the complaint actually makes no mention of race. I was just challenging sex-based preferences, right? So I was challenging discrimination against men, irrespective of race. So there was actually nothing about race in the document, but that did not prevent these Twitter mobs from, declaring me as an angry white male who should be crucified and killed, and so that's the situation. And yes, I think from their perception, the two issues are closely related, and they cannot really make any meaningful distinction between these issues. They really lack the capacity to do so, because in the absence of independent thought, I mean, I know that they're called NPCs and everything, and not all of them are so stupid. Like, some of them are, of course, like intelligent enough to understand the hypocrisy of their own position, and they're also the ones who are manipulating, the masses.
Yeah.
But some of them are like that. They're looking at the world from these like lenses, and they cannot really make a critical, rational judgment about the differences. They just don't seem to have the faculty, and it's really interesting.
Yeah. So, they have
the more education they receive from colleges, the more, incapable of exercising independent judgment they become. So
well, these are people who, a very substantive portion of them have personality disorders, and then they are able to go to university and study entire subject matters that are written by people who almost universally had personality disorders or have them. And so and then they're surrounded by people who have personality disorders who are in this echo chamber, and you just end up with the most insufferably, insidious, selfish, delusional, and vengeful, hateful people that you could ever encounter.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are really hateful, so I agree with that. And I mean, there are people in academia who are like more reasonable.
Oh, well, I just meant like the gender studies-ish stuff.
Yeah, but they do not speak up, so... And especially people in like professional departments, like STEM, medicine, law. Even in law, I mean, they can be surprisingly non-political and they don't want to do anything. And then there are all these grievance studies departments, which are just breeding grounds for these identity politics advocates who they produce nothing meaningful. They're just these are parasitic departments. Like what would happen if institutions just abolish their women's studies departments or critical race studies departments? Nothing is going to change because they don't produce anything. The only thing that changes is that we will spend less taxpayer money on these departments.
Yeah, well, they're training to write the manuals for how to report your friends and neighbors in the communist totalitarian state that they're hoping to have. They want to be able to train people on how do you report your disobedient people who hate the feminist totalitarian state. How do you report them and for what reasons? And these are the people who are going to write that instruction manual. Something. It's the only thing I can imagine.
Yeah. So I think we ran, let me see, what do you see as the biggest obstacle against men's rights and fair treatment for males? What has been your biggest disappointment during your time as an advocate for male rights regarding your personal work? There were a lot of, I've had successes, I've also had failures, of course, but I think my biggest disappointment is that it can actually be very difficult to foster meaningful collaboration between some men's rights groups. I mean, I'm not going to give any names, and I've had like very positive collaborations with some groups as well. And maybe this is because there are limited resources. Feminist groups get all this funding from the federal government, while men's rights groups are volunteer based. So they have limited resources, and I think that leads to a certain mentality of jealousy. They don't want to, like, when they need help, they always like ask for help and like I've done my best, but when it's kind of their turn to offer assistance, they don't want to do that. So, and it might also be like, I don't know, like a generational thing. Kind of some of the older men's rights activists just support each other, and there's like there might be a generational rift. I'm not entirely sure if that's the reason, but that idea has been floating around for some time. But I think it might be mainly the disproportion in terms of funding that's leading to that problem. So the few groups that are trying to oppose the feminist narrative, they tend to have limited funds and resources. So I guess there's like competition, you might put it that way. So I haven't always received a lot of support from other men's rights groups or like activists, although I sometimes did, and sometimes they couldn't really do anything. So I don't know. It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's challenging. And then the last question: what is the most inaccurate thing the media repeatedly says about your work or chooses to leave out? That was my personal involvement with Title IX years ago, and then there's a Splinter News, which is this. It's like a publication of Gizmodo, which is this like really far left cesspool. So Jezebel, Splinter News, The Slot. That's another publication. They are all run by they're all run by Gizmodo, and they ran like a false and defamatory article about my personal involvement in Title IX. So I responded to that on my personal website, and Barbara Kay and the PJ Media article kind of responds to that as well. So I think that has been, at least we have been successful in terms of publishing a counter response.
Wait, what did they say?
It offers like a very distorted perception of my personal involvement in Title IX, as well as a defamation lawsuit that happened right after. So it's a long story, and I don't really want to repeat that, but it's full of falsehoods. So it's like a very distorted narrative. So I published a counter response. And I know the Splinter News has been aggressively promoting the article. They published it on Twitter multiple times. They published it through all their different blogs. So not just on Splinter News, but on Jezebel, blah, blah. So I can see that they're spamming Google in order to increase its ranking.
Yeah.
And then NBC News kind of like did not go into that detail, but they said that because I was accused, that was the only basis of my advocacy, But that's not really the case, because most of the issues that I'm dealing with do not actually have much to do with sexual harassment disputes, like scholarships and things like that. And second, I mean, that woman accused me of sexual harassment because, in her words, and that's a verbatim quote, he was manipulating my emotions and lying to me by telling me that he was not attracted to me. So they are trying to present this woman as a credible accuser. So, yeah.
That's absurd. So we have about 15 minutes left. We can maybe go a little bit over, but we were speaking about some different things. You were curious about some stuff having to do with like gay men and male bonding and that type of thing. So if you'd like to talk about that for the last little portion.
Oh yeah, that issue. So but one thing that I have been thinking about. I think there was this earlier discussion about the feminists hate gay men, or how do they integrate gay men into their ideology.
They hate us more than straight men.
I'm sorry?
Okay, this wasn't true during the 80s and 90s during the AIDS crisis, but after marriage, gay marriage passed nationally, they promptly turned around and started demonizing gay men, and now it's to the point where I kind of think there's a lot of tangible evidence to point towards them hating gay men even more than straight men.
I'm not sure if they hate gay men more than straight men. I mean, if we're talking about feminists specifically.
Well, I wouldn't say the dramatic majority of people who call themselves feminists don't really know much about feminism. But if you actually go through either the older feminist theory, which was very, very vigorously anti-gay, or a lot of the newer stuff about gay men, it's basically you can't read an LGBT publication and find them ever saying anything positive about male homosexuals or affirming.
I don't know that literature. So as an English student, I was exposed to one of these feminist diatribes by, trying to remember her name. She's French. Luce Irigaray, I think that's her name. So, and she wrote wrote this article saying that male homosexuality was the same as patriarchy. So I think that was more or less the argument. I think feminists are more tolerant towards some gay men as long as they are willing to, perpetuate the proper form of ideology. You have this gay male professors in women's studies departments who are kind of the token males.
Yeah.
You get favorable treatments, although there are also some straight male, beta types who are also getting similar favorable treatment as well. But I think gay men who do not play along, of course, they get excommunicated by the left, and there are quite a few. I mean, there are some famous examples like My Lord Dave, but at the same time, there was this. I saw this exchange on the chat. ContraPoints ran a video, which I think, from the leftist perspective, wasn't critical enough towards men's rights activists, because she read Warren Farrell's The Myth of Male Power and made some positive remarks about it. So
allegedly read. I don't really believe it.
I mean, I don't know. And it wasn't entirely positive. She was still making fun of men's rights activists, but still.
And misrepresented Farrell. Did you see Karen's video response to it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But what they ended up doing was, she got the video, I think was it taken down, was it deplatformed, but they did something, so it was actually irritating.
Oh well, it was
the actual controversy was over some tweets she had made where she was
there were tweets,
not aggressively, she was tweeting, and she was saying, she said that she doesn't like the idea of like non-binary. She didn't even say it that. She actually was pretty diplomatic, which is part of what makes it such a funny scandal, I guess. But the non-binaries, took their human sacrifice, but
that's so.
I thought it was that video about transgenders that is what sparked the controversy.
I mean, was there a new video? I don't think there was. I think that the last video corresponded with the one on men.
No. It was before that. It was before that. It was called Transgenders.
But I mean, what I'm trying to say is that gay men who, I guess, deviate from this ideology, they're also kind of like punished. And it was kind of interesting when during Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation process, Senator Graham kind of backed up Brett Kavanaugh, and the left-wing press just like started running articles about how he's like closeted gay and like things like that. So it's kind of interesting, even though they do not like, they have this idea that gay men are like a special subset of men that should receive protection from the left. Whenever you have a particular gay man who deviates from that idea, they get punished. So,
yeah, what I would say about feminists and gay men is that feminists are eager and assuming that gay men will ally with them because they believe, often foolishly, that gay men hate straight men, because a lot of gay guys do. A lot of gay guys have issues with straight men due to bullying as a kid and things like that. And so they just, assume, oh, okay, well, we'll, befriend these gay men and bond over the mutual hatred. But ultimately, when they find out that a gay man isn't swallowing the feminist poison, they become immediately very, very vengeful. And I think it's because they know that gay men are aware that feminism is bull crap. Or I can say shit now, my channel's demonetized. We can't say hate speech words, but we can. So, gay men have this inherent, if you're explicitly not a feminist, there's no great way of blackmailing gay men. I mean, it doesn't stop them from trying. They try to say that gay men sexually assault women frequently. This is a feminist myth that has emerged recently in recent years. It's actually what sparked me to start making videos, because I just thought it was so crazy. I was like, okay, I don't like where this is going. But they also know that if anybody's going to be skeptical to patriarchy theory, it's going to be gay men, because gay men, there's no reason why a gay man would believe that all men collude either consciously or subconsciously to oppress all women, to privilege all males. That just doesn't make sense. So
wait, I was going to say something. Another interesting thing is, despite this idea of a gay feminist alliance, which I think has been kind of falling apart, so it's not really as efficient as it used to be, and that's partially because now feminism has gone to such a, I guess, like extreme degree that all men are just like excluded by definition. But in Brazil, for example, only 2% of all lethal hate crimes target lesbians. The rest really target gay men and bisexual men and men who, transition into women. So male to female transsexuals.
Yeah.
So 98% of murders that are related to, like LGBT kind of like hate crimes.
Yeah.
Target men. So, and in the US, the percentage of lesbians who are targeted by hate crimes are 15%. So it's higher than Brazil, but at the same time, they are counting non-lethal. Like basically, they are counting everything, including lesbians. I don't know who get upset at anything.
Oh, probably.
One of them was two lesbians, two lesbians, and one lesbian murdered her partner, and this was classified as a hate crime
Yeah. Well, and like probably lesbians writing, anti-lesbian slurs on their own garage because lesbians are very into doing such things statistically. They fake hate crimes all the time.
But that's interesting. So people, like, the overwhelming majority of individuals who get, like, murdered or subjected to severe bullying for being gay are men. They're gay men, not lesbians, or they're male to female transsexuals, not female to male transsexuals. So that's really interesting. And of course, jurisdictions that ban homosexuality almost always single out male homosexuality.
Yes.
So the Soviet Union banned male homosexuality, it did not ban female homosexuality. Like, Nazis murdered gay men, but they did not murder lesbians.
Yeah.
So, which again kind of really, I guess, like, disrupts the idea that gay rights is something that can be advanced under the banner of feminism. It's really not. Like, and the only thing that I guess, like, you can do if gay men ally themselves with feminism, they're just going to end up losing, because nothing will happen to lesbians. So even if, like, let's say the traditional conservatives, and there are indeed some traditional conservatives like evangelical Christians and like groups who probably will want to roll back some of these legal protections, but they will still go after gay men. They won't ever go after lesbians. And that's really interesting. So, which is, I think, part of the reason why I find the whole idea of a gay feminist alliance is really, it's meaningless, because gay men are not. I mean, and if you come to think of it, if the overwhelming majority of men who are murdered for being gay are men, the overwhelming majority of people who are murdered for being homosexual are men. So male homosexuals versus female homosexuals. And if you look at the fact that the overwhelming majority of people who are targeted in like sexual harassment disputes, who lose their lives, who lose their livelihoods, who have to pay money in sexual harassment disputes, are heterosexual men, not heterosexual women. So if you put the two and two together, you will see that the underlying metrics of discrimination is misandry. So it's not, homophobia.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the things Derek likes to bring up a lot is, or Spacepan, who's we also call Derek because it says so on, is that, the overwhelming majority of issues that affect any man apply to both gay and straight men. And
of course. I mean, like, bias in
universities,
justice system, for example, and like things like that. Or I guess, like, if you're male and if you're applying to college, even if you're gay, you're still marked as male, right? So it's not like there's a third category or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're male, then that means that you will get excluded from affirmative action on the basis of sex, even if you're gay. So it is true that in terms of classification purposes, gay men are more likely to face negative treatment for being male just because they are male. So this is leaving aside everything else that's just got to do with sexual orientation issues. Yeah. But I think at the same time, the left is more, at least not as aggressive towards gay males in terms of sexuality when it comes to heterosexual males, I think.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Yes, the main push. Okay, I would say that personally, the way that I observe it to be, is that they're always coming up with new and more expansive ways of attacking heterosexual sexuality and practices. Like all the things that straight guys do must be demonized or somehow micromanaged, or there must be legal action that you can take to stop them from doing these things, blah blah blah, which they haven't really gotten to with gay men, though I don't think it would stop them from potentially trying. But what the real problem is with gay men, in terms of having to deal with these things, is that gay men, our sexuality is under attack in the Inside Out. If you go up to, if you search for any of the LGBT blogs or anything, like, you could do this, on your own time if you want to, because I can't really search. But, you know what, I can. My screen is right in front of me. Let's just search for some gay male dating is... So, gay male dating. Wait, no, okay, so, okay, now I'll look up hookup applications are, because, the thing is that they never say anything nice about us anymore. It's always just calling us names. Apps are...
well, to be fair, the straights have appropriated the hookup culture.
Wait, hold on. Gay... why can't I... Okay, now I can only find just ads for apps. Okay, long story short, there's nothing that's ever positive about gay male dating in these things. It's always talking about how gay men are racist, misogynist, and transphobic. I cannot remember the last time I've seen anything the least bit affirming or speaking about gender-specific discrimination against gay men. It's all generally about trans people, sometimes about how gay men need to be better allies to women or something. Or it's just full-on criticisms. The closest thing that regularly happens that is kind of close to defending gay men in any way is when they say that when they accuse a conservative or somebody like Kevin Hart of being homophobic, then it's like all of a sudden they're supposedly totally pro-gay again, but it's really only it's just as a vessel to attack somebody else.
That's interesting. So as long as there's a conflict between a straight conservative male and the gay left, then they are likely to side with the gay guy. But otherwise, within the leftist hierarchy, it's true. Like within the intersectional dogma, gay men are, closely hitting they're about to hit the bottom. I think, like gay males within LGBT.
Oh, definitely the bottom. Definitely, they hate gay white men. I promise you. Like, my friend Chadwick Moore, who comes on fairly regularly, he's good friends with Milo actually, and he shares my opinion that the left actually kind of hates gay men more than they hate straight men, or gay white men rather. I think it's also because a lot of gay men are rejecting the Democratic Party, and white ones in particular, and so there's this mass apostate syndrome. And the other thing that I just haven't mentioned yet is just because Islam is so anti-gay male, and a lot of these far leftist and communist groups and organizations and that type of thing, they do literally get funding from Islamic governments, wealthy Islamists, and such things.
Oh, that's interesting. So gay rights groups in the U.S. get funding from Islamic groups?
Intersectional feminists, which is rooted in communism. The communists have allied ever since.
I'm sure there's a lot of funding, because it's not like news to me that the U.S. receives a lot of funding from Islamic groups, because I was actually active in Turkey's secular opposition, and you might find it interesting that Turkish secularists, like people in Turkey who are opposed to Islamic fundamentalism, they actually have a very negative opinion of the United States, because they perceive the United States to be a sponsor of Islamism, and it's actually true from their perspective.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean,
in Syria, like the United States, and this is the Obama administration has funneled more than to the jihadists in Syria. And these are, they are people who throw gay men off rooftops and, behead them and, murder them. So, and the Western press, like the liberal mainstream press, portrayed this jihadists as, rebels, democratic activists. So it's bullshit. And that's actually really interesting, because when I was in Turkey, I did sympathize with the left, because the left in, I think, Turkey is actually very secular, and they are very opposed to Islamic fundamentalism, and they take it very, very seriously. Whereas here in the United States, it's the exact opposite. You have groups like SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, claims that anyone who classifies the Islamic Brotherhood as a terrorist organization is an Islamophobic extremist. And the Islamic Brotherhood it's a terrorist organization. They murder people. I mean, it's just like such a ridiculous degree of double think. And it's true that it also shows how stupid and inconsistent these, identity politics advocates are. You really have no way of it just fails. The whole system fails basic logic.
Yeah,
you're right with that.
Well, and governments like Qatar, and I assume other governments and wealthy individuals that are of the Islamic faith, fund things like AJ Plus, which is, American propaganda, and it's all intersectional and very supposedly anti-racist and very anti-capitalist, and it's all pro-gay and everything. But clearly they don't have anything like that in Qatar. They are they want all of this stuff to essentially make our society fall apart, and they believe that that's the most efficient way that they can help nudge the American experiment down the tubes, is to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what's the extent of their penetration of of society, and I don't really know about that. But I got banned from Twitter for criticizing Ilhan Omar. So she was tweeting something, and I responded, and I have the message, so I can send that to you.
Yeah.
I said she was saying something, I don't know. Just in her regular bullshit style, and I just tweeted back saying radical Islam is wrong, and violent passages in the Quran. How do you explain this? And I got banned from Twitter. So It's permanent. Yeah, I appealed it twice. Christina Hoff Sommers and Kathy Young, two a well-known journalist and a famous author, appealed on my behalf because I've maintained communication with both, and they did nothing. So criticizing Islam is such a major taboo.
Oh yeah,
the American left is that if you do it,
I think that they own a lot of stocks in social media companies. Now that is on their face.
I think even Trump is differential to some degree to the Saudi government.
Yeah,
I think that's a very malicious presence in American politics. I agree with that. I think things are better now. Trump cut off the funding. So CIA had a program which was providing more than $1 billion to the jihadists in Syria. So he cut that off, and recently the United States also bombed some of the Islamists in Idlib, which is Idlib is the part of Syria where you have all these jihadists who are holed up. But they lost the civil war, and I think losing the Syrian civil war was a very serious global blow to Islamists. I think they were expecting to win. They sent a lot of foreign soldiers to Syria to win the war, but the Assad administration took back Aleppo, which is the capital of Syria. So I think that really. And another interesting development is in Turkey, the secular opposition took back 5 of the biggest cities, including Istanbul, which is the 4th largest city in the world. So they passed into the control of the secular opposition. And these people are just to give you an idea, the Turkish politician who is running the Istanbul chapter of the opposition party, she is a very outspoken critical.
Hello?
Yeah, I don't hear him either. He just cut out for a moment.
Yeah.
Because he's Islamist.
Oh,
now you're back.
So yeah, we couldn't hear you for a second.
Are you? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can hear you. We just missed the last 10 seconds of what you said.
Okay, so that Turkish politician, her name is Canan. So And she was recently sentenced to 10 years in prison, which is, by the way, like unprecedented. I've never heard of anything like that happening, for her social media posts in which she was criticizing Islam. So I was thinking, oh my God, like I got banned from Twitter for criticizing Islam, how horrible. But then there's this Turkish politician who may potentially go to 10 years in prison. And I mean, she won the election. It's like as absurd as, I don't know, like you are trying to jail the person who is running the main opposition party. It's just like insane. And it might be overturned. I think it's just too absurd. But it's really interesting that even if it's symbolic, they gave her a 10-year-old prison sentence for criticizing Islam on Twitter. That's ridiculous for, yeah.
Well, there's a good book to read about the alliance between the radical left in the United States and Islam. It's called Unholy Alliance Unholy Alliance by David Horowitz. I recommend it to people a lot. It was written in 2006, but it seems way more plausible now, knowing what we know now. As compared to what it did then. It seemed like he knew of all these things that were already brewing that have now shown their true colors. So, yeah. But we've been going for about 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So
I'm really hungry.
Okay. Well, it was really great to have you on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Is there any last words? Remember, guys, to try to help him out with his GoFundMe. You can maybe post it again in the chat one more time.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I'm gonna do that.
Okay. And then I have to.
I just received an email from Jordan Peterson, so I should maybe just say that. Yeah.
Yeah. They're on a first name basis.
Rehab.
He's been struggling. I don't think he's like in rehab full time. He just sent it like 13 minutes ago, but he's unhappy that he was prescribed those drugs. So yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've seen some people have had different reactions to it, which is pretty sad. You'd kind of hope that people were kind of uniformly like sympathetic to what's going on with him. So
yeah, I'm sympathetic.
Hopefully, we'll have some good news from.
I mean, I'm also very sympathetic. Like his wife has been diagnosed with cancer, and I mean, it's like it's the kind of thing that like breaks a lot of people. So I think he's dealing with it pretty. I mean, efficiently from his end. So.
Okay, guys, I gotta go to the bathroom really bad, so I'm gonna end this stream. Bye.
Yes.